The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 6. Part 3. Agnorok, go with that platoon and cover the southern flank, Kush ordered. The half-orc thought about not obeying the order, but there was little he could do. Kush, a wagon has left for the Black Hills, we have to go help its occupants. The magician turned his head and surveyed the hills. Okay, take your place. I'm going to warn Aris. It was the only thing the half-orc could do, and he and his dozen companions headed for the southern flank with sword in hand. When Arian opened his eyes he had a big headache and felt like he was bleeding from his head. It must have been a pretty big wound. The young woman was leaning against what was left of the wagon. Someone had rescued her since she had fallen quite far from there. With a great effort, he tried to see who was standing in front of him smiling. Arian was frightened, and there in front of him were 4 bandits, completely covered with desert dust, armed with swords and bows, dressed in tattered clothes. They looked at her greedily and her smile was disgusting. It was not difficult to find out her intentions and that her situation was desperate. There were 3 men and an orc, huge and terrifying, with big pointed ears. He showed large sharp yellow teeth, which was smiling evilly. His skin was dark green and full of tattoos and scars. In his right hand he carried a large short sword. Comrades, I already told you that this work would give us great rewards. Hearing these words from one of the members of the group, the others smiled lasciviously. Arian tried to move to escape, but he couldn't. A very sharp pain in his side prevented him from doing so. He must have at least 1 or 2 broken ribs. She had to be thankful that she was alive, though in the hands of these bandits it was almost better to die in the accident. The bandits slowly approached her, knowing that she was very vulnerable at the moment and could not defend herself. The first one will be me, that's why I discovered her. One of them commented with satisfaction. Arian looked away. It was disgusting. We shouldn't leave it for after the battle. We've been in this desert for 3 filthy months, the battle can wait. The bandit crouched down, threw his weapons to the ground, and both arms reached out to touch Arian's breasts. She lowered her head in resignation. The rest of the group was smiling with pleasure. He didn't touch them, his hands stopped in his tracks. The bandit tried to scream but only made a dull sound. Arian looked up, the bandit dying over her, trying to pull out an arrow that had pierced her throat. Blood poured down on Arian. Another arrow, accurate, hit the head. The target fell like a dead weight on the young woman. The other 3 bandits watched in surprise as their leader lay dead. Arian felt the weight of the bandit imprison her and the stammering movement of his agonizing limbs. She tried to move her head but her range of vision was very limited. The bandits took cover with the wagon and tried to discover their mysterious attacker, but it was impossible for them. They seemed to be alone among the abundant rocks that crowded at the beginning of the slopes of the desolate brown hills. In the distance you could hear the screams, explosions and clashes of swords from the attack on the caravans. The orc did not have patience as one of his virtues. He ran up to Arian's height, grabbed her by the head and lifted her up. Arian noticed how he dug his nails into his head. The pain in his abdomen didn't let him breathe. He also noticed how the edge of a knife touched the skin of his neck. The orc stared into the void and shouted in his hoarse voice. Listen, damn! If you don't come out of hiding, the girl will die right here. The blade squeezed Arian's neck a little and a little blood gushed out. Then from a rock much closer than everyone thought, barely 4 meters from the wagon, a figure appeared that released a short wooden bow and advanced to the bandits slowly. The orc smiled and let go of Arian, who fell to the ground like a sack of onions. The stranger wore the same uniform as Gosberg and Agnorok, but his face was covered by a blue scarf. His black hair was swayed by the soft warm desert breeze. His black eyes looked at his adversaries in a cold, calculating way. He had an air of Agnorok but was shorter and less corpulent, that is, his gait was much more elegant. The stranger reached the height of the bandits, drew a sword he had, and got into an attack position. The 3 bandits stood parallel and advanced to face him, the orc in the central position and the 2 humans on the flanks. these were the ones who attacked without saying a word. Arian could now see the scene, all that his blurred vision left him. The attack of the first bandit, the one on the left flank, was quickly dodged by his rival by means of a ribbon to his attempt to thrust the heart. The stranger launched a quick counterattack, thrust to the side with the edge going upwards. The blow sought the heart and found it. Now the first bandit lay on the ground. The other one on the right did not hesitate and attacked again. The unknown blocked this attack with his sword. With his right leg he made a direct sweep to the right knee of the bandit. He fell to the ground. He was easy prey, decapitated without being able to defend himself. The stranger was deadly, swift as Gosberg had shown in Ziri's alley. The orc froze, staring at the corpses of his companions who had not had the slightest chance against the stranger. "I know you," the orc exclaimed as he brandished his short sword. The stranger took off his handkerchief and showed his young face with a smile, and spoke in a deep voice. "Arasath Arakanaras." The orc opened his eyes and bowed. After he sat up, Arian felt as if the orc regained his dignity. It was a strange feeling. "My lord, I'm sorry, but I must try to kill you," the orc managed to say with a strange sense of pride and resignation. The orc did something strange. In his left hand he removed a leather wristband with his teeth, then with his sword he made a cut on his wrist quite deeply, sucked a large amount of blood, and then spat it on the ground. "Decast." The orc showed a smile, his mouth full of his own blood as he said those words. The stranger performed the same ceremony as the orc, and when he had finished, he also said, "Decast." Both of them remained in silence watching each other, until the orc decided to attack his opponent with a huge scream. His opponent remained still waiting for him with apparent tranquility. The orc attacked frontally brandishing his sword with his two hands. It was a beastly blow. He performed it with all the strength of his powerful physique. He could break a thick rennet tree, however the stranger dodged it with a simple movement of his trunk to his left. It was a slight and elegant gesture. The orc was surprised to see that his brutal thrust was only in the air, and when he missed his punch, he became unbalanced, falling to the ground heavily. A deadly mistake that the stranger took advantage of now that his opponent had his back to him. He quickly turned and attacked with his sword quickly, a thrust from the back straight to the heart. It was graceful, fast, and deadly. The orc sighed, before vomiting blood and then dying. Once the threat of the bandits was over, the stranger approached Arian who lay unconscious. In the distance reinforcements arrived with a wagon. He put the handkerchief back on and lifted it up to safety. Both stayed in that place waiting for the help that the young woman needed to arrive.